When someone mentions Spain, the same images almost always come to mind. Barcelona, Real Madrid, bullfighting, flamenco, tapas, crowded beaches, partying until dawn. It's the stereotype of a warm, noisy, touristy country that seems to live without rest. But there's a part of Spain that goes against all of that. We're talking about a place where it rains a lot, it's cold, the landscape is green, the music comes from the bagpipes, and the parties are more reminiscent of Ireland than Spain itself. And the most curious thing is that, in most cities, Spanish isn't even spoken on a daily basis. This region is called Galicia. Perhaps the name sounds familiar because of the Camino de Santiago, one of the most famous pilgrimage routes in the Christian world. But Galicia is not just about faith. Did you know that this same region is also one of the main gateways for illegal substances entering the European continent? That one of the most influential mafias in Europe operates there? What if I told you that, right in the middle of this mountainous territory, there is a village with only 7 residents? And yet, it has 9 bars open. Today, Bello Mundo will take you to discover a Galicia that doesn't appear on postcards. Number 1. Location and general information. Galicia is located in the northwest corner of Spain, bordering Portugal, on that little tip of the map that seems to be somewhat forgotten by the rest of the country. While much of Spain is dry, hot, and sunny, Galicia is the opposite. It is humid, green, and foggy. This contrast alone changes everything. The coastline is indented with sea inlets called rias, and it has nothing to do with the open beaches of the Mediterranean. These are strips of water that invade the continent, surrounded by mountains, fishing villages, and towns clinging to the rocks. It is a more closed, colder, more Atlantic coastline, and when we move away from the coast, the scenery changes again. The interior is made up of mountains and deep valleys, with narrow roads, fields covered in green, and villages scattered in places that seem frozen in time. This more rugged geography has long hampered transportation, trade, and even communication between communities. The climate in the region is also different. Galicia is among the rainiest regions in all of Spain. The sky is always overcast, the humidity is constant, and the winter is usually much harsher than in the rest of the country. While the south faces long periods of drought, here water has never been a problem. It has shaped the landscape, influenced the architecture, defined the type of crops grown, and even the way people live their lives. It was precisely this combination of a closed coastline, mountainous interior, humid climate, and geographical isolation that created a region that seems out of place compared to the rest of Spain. A part of the country with its own character, weather, and behavior. And these differences are explained by history. Number 2. History. Long before anyone spoke of Spain, this part of the northwest of the Iberian Peninsula already had owners. They were the Celtic peoples, scattered across hills, valleys, and the cliff-lined coastline, living in villages on top of hills, always close to the sea, forests, and fields. Life revolved around nature and the community itself. They planted, fished, raised animals, performed rituals, and followed a closed routine, but one that was completely connected to the territory. The truth is that these peoples did not stay only in Galicia. They appear in various regions of Northern Europe and are at the origin of the cultures of Ireland and Scotland. So, when someone sees a party with bagpipes, circle dancing, low fog, and a stone village, this comparison immediately comes to mind. Even the more reserved manner of the people carries similar traits. But we'll talk more about that later. Over time, the scenario began to change with the arrival of the Romans. They brought roads, cities, mines, and that imperial logic that transformed the peninsula. The Northwest entered this world, but without completely erasing what had existed before. When Rome collapsed, the Suevi arrived, followed by the Visigoths. Later, the Moors advanced from the south, but did not dominate this area with the same force. From top to bottom, the Christian kingdoms regained territory and redrew borders. It was during this process that the region ended up being incorporated into the Crown of Castile. It loses its own political power, but maintains its way of life, its relationship with the countryside, the sea, and the community. Only much later, with the union of the crowns, is Spain born as a unified country. And even so, Galicia never completely blended in. It continued with its own festivals, strong rural calendar, ancient traditions, and a very clear sense of identity. The autonomy that these people achieved in the 20th century did not come for free. It was the result of a long history marked by resistance and attachment to their own identity. Today, they have their own government, parliament, and cultural policies, and although they are part of Spain, they make a point of remembering that they are also equal, but with a different essence. Number 3. Galician. One of the first things that strikes visitors here is that, in many places, Spanish does not dominate the conversation. You walk down the street, enter a market, listen to a group in a bar, and realize that people are speaking another language. It is Galician. Most people understand it, and many use it in their daily lives. In small towns, it ends up being the natural language between neighbors, family, and work. Spanish itself only appears when someone from outside arrives, and even then, rarely. Its presence is also maintained thanks to schools, where children learn Galician from an early age, along with Spanish. This prevents the language from becoming a museum piece and ensures that it is passed on from generation to generation in a living form. For those hearing it for the first time, the sound comes as something of a surprise. Some words are similar to Portuguese, others resemble Spanish, and it has its own musicality that is not completely confused with either of the two languages. It is familiar but different. This mixture comes from afar. During the Middle Ages, the language spoken here and in what is now Portugal was practically the same. When Portugal separated and formed its own country, the language took a different path. Galician, on the other hand, remained in this region, coexisting with Castilian and evolving in its own particular way. Today, Galician serves as a symbol of identity. It is a natural way of showing that this land has its own voice and a history that has never been lost, even though it shares space with another dominant language. Number 4. Traditions, festivals, and the Galician way. If there is one thing that has never gone out of style here, it is the custom of celebrating together. A festival is not just a date marked on the calendar. It is part of the way of life. Throughout the year, there is always something happening in squares, villages, churches, markets, and beaches. The music already reveals that this place is different from the rest of Spain. Instead of guitars and loud clapping, the most common sound is that of the bagpipes, accompanied by drums that set the rhythm in an almost hypnotic way. It doesn't remind you of the Mediterranean. It reminds you much more of Northern Europe. And this speaks directly to the Celtic heritage that is still alive. One of the oldest celebrations linked to this past is the Night of the Calacus, the local version of Halloween. The streets are filled with carved pumpkins, candles, stories of spirits, and an atmosphere of mystery. Everything revolves around the idea that the boundary between the living and the dead is closer at this time of year. Another date that mobilizes everyone is the Night of San Juan in June. The beaches and neighborhoods are filled with bonfires. People jump over the fire, make wishes, eat grilled sardines with bread, and stay out on the streets until dawn. Many people still go into the sea at midnight, believing that the water will wash away the bad things. On some beaches, women jump over waves on their backs as part of fertility rituals. Herbs also play a role in this universe. In the late afternoon of the 23rd, people harvest plants such as rue, rosemary, and verbena. They are left to soak in the open air overnight. The next day, many people use this water on their faces as a gesture of protection, health, and luck. The carnival here also follows a different logic. Introito is rural, full of masks, bells, heavy clothes, and folkloric figures that take over the streets. In some villages, characters appear who run, make noise, scare, and provoke. Each place has its own version, with costumes that have been around for centuries. Folklore completes this scenario. Stories about processions of souls crossing roads at night are still part of the imagination. The so-called magus, a kind of popular witch, appear in legends, symbols hung on doors, and rituals performed with herbs to protect the home. All of this together forms a very unique way of life, a mixture of celebration, superstition, faith, nature, and memory. A way of life that has survived for centuries without disappearing. Number 5. Gastronomy. Like the festivals, the food here is also a tradition passed down from generation to generation. One of the most famous dishes is pulpo a fera, which is nothing more than cooked octopus, cut into pieces, served only with olive oil, paprika, and coarse salt. Simple and present at practically every popular festival and street fair. Another classic is caldo gallego, a hearty soup made with potatoes, cabbage, and meat. It appears mainly in winter when the cold sets in and food needs to really sustain the body. In the countryside, the tradition remains strong with dishes such as lecon con grelos, which is pork with green leaves, and with products made right there, such as tetilla cheese, a soft cheese typical of the region. To accompany it, there is orujo, a very strong local brandy, a sure presence at more lively gatherings. It is from this combination that one of the best-known rituals here is born, the queimada. The orujo goes into a clay bowl along with sugar, lemon peel, and coffee. All of this is set on fire while someone recites the Conjuro da Queimada, a text spoken aloud that asks for protection and wards off evil. It is a drink, a spectacle, and a tradition all at the same time. And along with the food come the pilgrimages, religious festivals in which people walk to remote chapels, attend mass, and then spend the rest of the day eating, drinking, playing music, and bringing the whole community together. And since the conversation has turned to parties, drinks, and tradition, there is a place that seems to sum it all up in a tiny space. Number 6. A Gouxa, the village with 7 residents and 9 bars. A Gouxa is a small village in the municipality of Dozon, in the interior of the province of Pontevedra, about an hour's drive from Santiago de Compostela. On normal days, the scene is almost ghostly. Few occupied houses, empty streets, silence most of the time. Today, only 7 permanent residents live there. But everything changes completely twice a month. On the 11th and 23rd, the traditional village fair takes place. A fair that has existed for centuries, since the Middle Ages, when it was used to exchange animals, food, tools, and farm products. When market day arrives, the village seems to swell. Trucks park around it, stalls appear, farmers, merchants, residents of neighboring villages, and curious onlookers fill the streets. The place that was empty becomes a small commercial center for a few hours. That's where the 9 bars come in. On ordinary days, many are closed, but on market days, they all operate at the same time. People eating, drinking, bargaining, laughing, talking, passing the time. The bar becomes a base for those who spend the whole day there. In other words, they do not exist for those who live there. They exist for this temporary flow that appears twice a month. When evening falls, the stalls close, the trucks leave, and the village returns to silence. Now tell me, is Galicia an impressive place or not? Unfortunately, not everything here is folklore, wine, and tradition. It was precisely from this piece of land, so proud of its own culture, that one of the most influential figures in Spain's recent history emerged, Franco. Number 7. Dictator Franco. Francisco Franco was born in Ferrol, a port city in northern Galicia, known for its shipyard and strong military tradition. He came from a family with ties to the army and grew up in a strict, disciplined environment. It is not surprising that he pursued a military career from an early age. While still young, he gained fame in campaigns in North Africa, where he became known for his severe control and authoritarian worldview. But it was in 1936 that his name went down in history. That year, Spain plunged into a brutal civil war. Franco led part of the nationalist forces against the Republican government. The country was divided, cities were destroyed, and at the end of the conflict, the nationalists emerged victorious. With the victory, Franco assumed absolute control of Spain, and so began the longest dictatorship of the 20th century in the country, a regime marked by press censorship, political repression, persecution of opponents, and total control over public life. Along with this came a project of forced cultural unification. During the regime, regional languages, such as Galician, Catalan, and Basque, were pushed to the margins. Castilian Spanish became the mandatory language in public spaces, schools, and official communications. The curious thing is that this project came from the hands of a man born in a region that had its own language. Franco ruled until he was 75, and it was only after his death that the country began to reorganize its historical communities. It was during this process that Galicia regained its autonomy, strengthened the use of Galician, and reclaimed its right to be different, within a state that for decades had tried to force homogeneity. Number 8. The Atlantic route. Galicia has carried a heavy burden in the past: dictatorship, repression, cultural silencing. But some shadows continue to exist in the present, only in a different form. Today, this part of northern Spain is also known for a much less romantic reason. Over the last few decades, it has become one of the gateways for illicit goods. The starting point is geography. The coastline is huge, jagged, full of streets, small beaches, islands, and stretches where there is almost no surveillance. This scenario facilitates the movement of boats without attracting attention, thus creating a perfect base for illegal activities that began decades ago. In the 70s and 80s, the main business was not yet cocaine. It was cigarette smuggling. Fast boats arrived at dawn, unloaded boxes, and left before sunrise. This money and these logistics created a structure that would later be used for something much bigger. When the white powder began to arrive from South America in large quantities, the route was already in place. The substance came in larger ships or smaller boats, was unloaded at isolated points along the coast, and distributed throughout Europe from there. This is how the groups known as the Galician Mafia emerged, not as a single organization, but as several family clans scattered across coastal villages. They specialized in transportation and distribution, and in a short time became rich. In small towns, new mansions, imported cars, and a standard of living totally out of touch with the local reality began to appear. For years, part of the population saw these bosses as benefactors because they helped families, financed parties, and sponsored events. But everything began to change in the 90s when the Spanish state decided to crack down. Large police operations arrested important figures, seized tons of drugs, and dismantled several schemes. But we know that the operations were not eliminated. In fact, they just changed their methods, changed their routes, and adapted. The most striking proof of this came in 2019, when a handmade submarine, loaded with cocaine, was found off the Galician coast after crossing the ocean from South America. It was the first narco-submarine seized in Europe. This made it clear that this route is still active. Discreet, silent, operating on the margins of what appears in tourist photos, a modern side to an old problem. Number 9. Abandonment and the future. Despite its cultural strength, rich gastronomy, and the striking presence of the Galician language, Galicia is undergoing a silent process that threatens all of this. Rural abandonment. Starting in the 1950s, thousands of people left the villages for the big cities or migrated to other European countries, such as Germany, France, and Switzerland. What was left behind were empty fields, deserted villages, and a landscape that, in many places, resembles a forgotten land. Today, there are hundreds of villages with 2, 3, or 4 residents, such as Gouxa, which we just mentioned. In recent years, projects have emerged to try to reverse this scenario. Programs that encourage a return to the countryside, financing for young farmers, renovations of old houses, policies to attract new residents. But the pace is slow, much slower than the exodus that has emptied everything. So, did you already know about this Galicia off the tourist trail? Tell us in the comments what surprised you most about this video. If you liked the content, leave your like, share it, and of course, don't forget to activate the new hyper feature. This helps the channel gain visibility and continue bringing you these unbelievable trips through our Bello Mundo. See you next time.